Welcome back to the new series of Tell Vanessa. I'm your host, Vanessa Cruickshank. So what do we have in store for you this season? Well, we have some hard-hitting topics and debates, some interesting businesses and community endeavors, and of course, we have your dilemmas. Then we finish with some hot musical talent. So for the next 30 minutes, sit back, relax, and enjoy Tell Vanessa.
Just tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa. Just tell Vanessa now, tell Vanessa now. Just tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa.
What is a human life worth? Not much to human traffickers. Human trafficking is now ranked the third biggest crime around the world. In the UK, the Home Office estimates that 13,000 people are living as slaves in the UK. But this is not just a UK problem, this is a global issue. We're lucky to have in the studio with us Justine Currell, who's the Executive Director of Unseen, which is a charity that works to stop human trafficking. Good evening, Justine.
Good evening, Vanessa.
So you heard in my opening statement me say that this is a global issue, but many people don't actually understand what is human trafficking.
Well, you're absolutely right. It really is a global issue. And it's really hard to believe that in the 21st century, we're talking about so many people who are being abused and exploited in this way. The International Labour Organization estimates there are around 46 million people living a life of slavery and exploitation. For me, human trafficking is about the illicit trade in human beings, where people are bought and sold for a profit and for the benefit of others, with very little chance of prosecution for the criminals and horrendous human rights outcomes for those victims.
So how does someone get trafficked in the first place?
Well, I think it's about people preying on other people's vulnerabilities. So it's preying on the vulnerability of wanting a better life or wanting a job, or even vulnerabilities around drug and alcohol dependency. People are looking at those vulnerabilities and exploiting them in as many ways as possible through deception, coercion, and also things like juju rituals and voodoo rituals.
This is considered a hidden crime because a number of people were arrested in nail bars, and loads of people use nail bars, and they were arrested for human trafficking. How common is that?
Unfortunately, Vanessa, it is very common. We are seeing it in nail bars, we're seeing it in car washes, but we're also seeing it in other areas like agriculture, in factories. We're seeing sexual exploitation, forced prostitution, but also domestic servitude in people's private households. So this issue is widespread, and it's an issue that we need to tackle collectively.
I recently saw some statistics that 80% of Nigerian women that were trafficked into Italy in 2016 were trafficked for prostitution. How common is that?
It's extremely common, and unfortunately, as I said, it's about people's vulnerabilities, and it's about wanting to utilise and exploit people for a profit. So we're seeing this across the globe. This is an issue that happens in the UK, and I think that's the message that we need to get out to people. It is happening here, it's happening on our doorsteps, and we need to do something to tackle that.
On that note, we're actually going to watch a video of somebody that's been trafficked.
I was trafficked from Nigeria 2 years ago. I had been living with my mother, 3 brothers and 1 sister. Previously, I had helped teach in a primary school, but my dream was to attend university. One day, someone who had recently become my friend approached me with the opportunity of a cleaning job in the UK, promising I would earn enough money to go to the university. I did not want to go to Italy because I had heard that women are forced to work as prostitutes there, but I thought the UK would be safe. Before leaving, I had to attend a religious ceremony where I was forced to drink a liquid mixed with the insides of a hen and promised never to disobey my friend. I was told that if I disobeyed, I would die. I believed them. I was then given false documents, which I thought was unusual. But I trusted my friend, so I flew to the UK. From the airport, I was driven to a hotel where I thought I would start my new cleaning job. Instead, I was locked in a room with 3 other women and sexually exploited. If I did not obey, they threatened to beat me. This went on for several months, being raped every day and moving continually to different flats. One day, the flat was raided and I was rescued, moved to a hostel several hundred miles away where I thought I was safe. I phoned my mom and discovered the traffickers had found her in Nigeria and threatened to hurt her if I didn't come back to London. So I returned. After several more months of working as a sex worker, the police again raided the flat and I was rescued. This time they offered me protection through the government provision. I was referred to City Hearts and immediately received help. The people at City Hearts were so kind and helpful. I felt safe for the first time in months.
So how unique is the story that we've just heard?
Well, sadly, Vanessa, it's not unique at all. Since 2011 in the UK, we've seen a 40% year-on-year rise in the number of victims that we've identified through the UK government's national referral mechanism.
So what does the Unseen charity do?
Well, we do 3 main things really. We focus on providing direct survivor support services, so accommodation and other support that survivors require. We equip stakeholders, so we raise awareness and we also provide training. And we also look at systemic change, so working with the UK government, but also governments internationally to try and bring about the global changes that we need to tackle this terrible crime.
So can you give me an example of an incident you've had to deal with?
Well, we run the Modern Slavery Helpline right across the UK, and we've done that since October. And some of the calls that we get through are across the whole spectrum of different types of exploitation. One particular example that springs to mind is a young girl who called to say that she was in a situation of domestic servitude. She needed help and guidance straight away. She was fearful of what the couple that she was working for were going to do to her after she'd been threatened the previous night. She'd also been sexually abused by the man of the house, and we knew we needed to act quickly. So we worked with her and we worked with the local police to actually get her to a place of safety. Unfortunately, she is now receiving accommodation and support through a safe house underneath the national referral mechanism.
Okay. Because this is a hidden crime, how can the general public spot the signs that somebody's been trafficked?
Well, it is a hidden crime and that's part of the challenge. But people who are fearful of authorities, those who maybe look like they're not wearing the right clothing for the type of work they're doing, people who are working excessively long hours, look tired, maybe frightened, those are the various types of indicators that people can look out for. But what I would say is if you do spot some signs, you do think something's not quite right, then you can call the UK's Modern Slavery Helpline.
Thank you so much for coming in to speak to us this evening, Justine.
Thank you.
Thank you. The government are not catching up fast enough in terms of putting policy into action around human trafficking. And this is the question I put to the Equality First officer in Westminster.
There are multiple agencies within the UK addressing human trafficking and sex trafficking. For instance, you have the police, you have health services, you have social services, you have the UK Border Agency. And there are challenges in terms of coordination of all those different bodies. The UK government put in place the Modern Slavery Act in 2015, which is really looking at increasing coordination, consolidating existing laws and policies. And under that law, they've also put a UK Anti-Slavery Commissioner who has put in place a strategy to see how some of those things can be addressed.
There was a number of raids made recently in nail bars, but this is a billion-dollar industry and there's been no meaningful arrests. Why?
Victims of human trafficking and sex trafficking are the most vulnerable members within our communities. Traffickers are conditioning victims to a point that they don't feel safe or secure to be able to make reports. So for instance, they may be raped, they may be gang raped, they may be starved, they may have their passports taken away from them, and that just makes it very difficult for the victims to be able to make reports. And in some cases, when they are foreign nationals, they fear deportation because their immigration status may not be, properly in place. And when they are sent back, there is also a risk of re-trafficking.
Okay. So Equality Now, what is your role in terms of eradicating human trafficking?
Equality Now is a women's rights organization that's advocating for laws and policies to be put in place that protect women and girls. We want to see a world where women can enjoy their rights and have control over their bodies and their lives. For us, the foundation is really putting in place good laws. And in relation to sex trafficking and human trafficking, for us, good laws highlight the issue of equality between women and men. They highlight the need to provide services and support to victims so that victims are not treated as criminals. We also want to see perpetrators, who are the traffickers, the pimps, the brothel keepers, and people buying sex, to be criminalized, so that sends out a strong message that it is unacceptable and contrary to sex equality for women to be treated in that way, for people to have paid access to women's bodies.
This crime is simply not going to go away. The Home Office predict that human trafficking is going to continue to grow year on year. So we as the general public have to be vigilant for the signs that something isn't right, and not be afraid to report our suspicions when we become concerned. Because that simple action may just save someone's life.
Tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa.
It's Deliberate sponsors Tell Vanessa. It's Deliberate sponsors Tell Vanessa.
Tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa.
It's not that often that we get to feature an entrepreneur and a social activist, but we're lucky to have none other than William Adoasi, founder of the luxury watch brand Vitae London, here with us in the studio. Good evening, William.
Good evening.
So tell me a little bit about your brand.
Yeah, so Vitae London, Vitae is actually Latin for life, and our mantra as a brand is to be the fashion brand changing lives. So with each watch sold, we help support a child through education in South Africa. The reason it started was actually inspired by two things. First and foremost, my dad and his journey and story. So he grew up in a village in West Africa, in Ghana specifically, and through education, he was able to break the cycle of poverty in my family. And then the second thing that inspired it was my wife. So she went out to South Africa and she volunteered with a charity out there, and she saw that with a little bit of money, we could make a big impact in terms of removing barriers to education for children out there. So that's what inspired the sort of social activist side of things. And I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I've always loved fashion and watches. So I thought, why not combine my two biggest passions together? So that's where Vitae London was sort of birthed. So with each watch sold, as I said, we support a child through education.
That's brilliant. How do you come up with the designs, and how do you think of watches?
Yeah, so as I said, watches is something I've always been intrigued by. Never been able to afford like the super fancy watches. But I thought, why not produce a watch similar to those really high-end watches at a price point that people could afford? So I'm really inspired by watches of the 1960s and by watch brands such as Patek Philippe, etc. And I just love the classy finishes of their watches, but I found that there weren't many options at a reasonable price point. So I thought, why not create watches at a reasonable price point that look really good and classy, that support these children.
Which is a good idea. But you're also the Virgin Startup Business Ambassador.
Yeah.
Have you met Richard Branson?
Fortunately, I have. So I was invited for a breakfast at Richard Branson's house last year, June. So I got to meet him and sit down with him, which was an amazing experience.
So what does the ambassador entail?
Yeah, so how it actually all happened was a bit of a funny story. So with Virgin, they were giving out funding. So over 10,000 businesses applied, and they chose 1,000 businesses to be funded. And then out of the 1,000 businesses funded, they chose the 12 what they thought were standout ideas to become ambassadors for entrepreneurship in the UK via Virgin. So yeah, what it entails is that I go out across the country, speak at events, and inspire other people to become entrepreneurs and just follow a different path.
You're obviously an entrepreneur. What next for you?
So my vision is probably less focused on me and more focused on inspiring the people around me. So there's a lot of other people I see with great ideas, and I just want to help sharpen their ideas and see how they can sort of mix philanthropy with what they do as well. So I've got a friend who approached me and said he loved what I was doing with Vitae, and he's recently started a brand called Broken Chain. So it's the chain I'm wearing here. So their whole ethos is to break the poverty chains with the chains that they sell. So they actually provide clean drinking water to children with the sales of those. So I just really want to equip and inspire people around me to start ventures and start businesses and just grow on what I'm already doing with Vitae. We've only been going for 14 months. Okay. We've managed to sell in 26 countries, distributed
That's
over...
really impressive.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so we've distributed over 1,000 items of uniform to children in need as well. So I just really want to hone in on what we're doing, which is going quite well so far, and just expand it.
So what advice would you give somebody that wants to start up their business and have a social activist element to it?
Yeah, so first and foremost, for anyone that's wanted to start up a business, one piece of advice I like to always give is to just start. As simple as that sounds, a lot of people see the end goal, they see this massive dream that they have, this massive vision, and they get really intimidated by it that they never actually start. So I'd always tell people that day in, day out, just do one thing that can contribute to that thing starting, and do one thing that can contribute to the success of it. And before you know it, you would have gone a lot further than you would ever think. So I'd always say start. And in terms of more specifically people wanting to add a social element to what they're doing, I would always say choose something you're passionate about. I think people can quickly see when you're just maybe using the social activist side of things to make a profit or to bring in people. So people can always see when it's actually genuine. If you want it to be successful, choose something you're genuinely passionate about, so that when you're actually talking about it and you're spreading the word about what you're doing, people can see that you've got a heart for what you're doing. That's what I'd say.
100% agree. Thank you so much for coming today.
No worries, thanks for having me.
No worries.
Tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa.
So we're back with some more juicy dilemmas. This is the part of the show where you tell me your dilemmas, I tell you what I think, and then we take it to the streets. Our first dilemma this week is from a guy called Trevor. My girlfriend is really hot. We recently met online and we're planning on moving in together. I don't have any problems with her except for one small thing, which is turning into a big thing. Her breath is really bad. Sometimes you can smell it almost instantly when she walks into a room. At first I thought it was the coffee, so I stopped us drinking coffee. Her breath still smells. I've got mints on me all the time. I'm always offering her one. We recently went to a dinner party and she was talking to one of my friends. I saw my friend move back as she talked. I was so embarrassed. I don't know how to tell her that her breath smells and I don't want to hurt her feelings, but it's really bad. What should I do?
Tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa.
My advice to you is you can't have the most simplest of conversations, then you shouldn't be in a relationship. She may be slightly embarrassed, but I can guarantee that she would rather her man tell her something like this than a complete stranger. So fix up and man up. Tell your woman about her breath, and I guarantee in the end she'll thank you for it. But like I say each week, this is just my advice. Let's hear what they say on the streets.
Maybe you should have spiked her drink with mouthwash.
In these situations, I just think it's best to be honest.
Well, if they're going to move in together, I mean, if you can't tell her that, it's pretty basic.
You know, just tell them and get out of the way.
I think they're going to have a pretty honest chat together.
So Trevor, it's up to you whether you decide to take our advice. But as they say, a problem shared is a problem halved. So if you've got a dilemma, email us here at dilemma@tellvanessa.com. So we've come to the end of this show. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I would like to thank all our guests and thank you for sending in your dilemmas. Now we're going to leave you with a performance from an artist who is not only beautiful, but extremely talented. You may remember her from last year's X Factor. This is Yinka.
Marching through down the long road, 2 by 2, doing just what we're told. Our dreams are built, our lives were sold. My innocence is my attraction. They make us feel the touch is gold. And with the skills, it makes them grow. To keep us down is their role. Naive to what the world should know. It drew them right in, one by one. I was disappearing from what I loved, afraid of what I could become. Afraid I couldn't see the sun. It's time to take charge. No more tears and no excuses. No more saying it's hard. No grace had it easy. Now betting on my head of stone, I'm doing things the hard way. It's time to take charge. We live a fake reality. It's so dumb politically. It's time to take charge. It's time to take. Truth be told, you're on your own. 'Cause to break the mold is to go alone. Stand up tall, be proud, be bold. 'Cause you don't know the lot you hold. It drew them right in, one by one. I was disappearing from what I loved, afraid of what I could become. Afraid I couldn't see the sun. It's time to take charge. No more tears and no excuses. No more saying it's hard. No grace had it easy. Now betting on my head of stone, I'm doing things the hard way. It's time to take charge. We live a fake reality. It's so dumb politically. It's time to take charge. It's time to take. It's time to take. It's time to take charge. Just tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa. Just tell Vanessa now, tell Vanessa now. Just tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa. Just tell Vanessa, just tell Vanessa now. Tell Vanessa. Tell Vanessa now.